To the unfortunate, the voice of condolence is sweet, the language of commiseration delightful. These feelings I have experienced in the society of Mr. A stranger, he rejected not our prayer. Unknown, he shut not his ear to our supplication. He has alleviated our sorrows. May God bless him. He has wept with us. May angels rejoice with him at a throne of glory. Enclosed, sir, is a key that secretes my little all. Give it him, and say for me, as he deserted me not while living, I hope he will discharge my last request. How my property is to be disposed of, he will find explained in a paper within my trunk, to which is attached a schedule of the whole. I only wish him to see it removed to a place of safety, until to whom it is given shall call for it. The hour is come. Farewell, sir. Farewell. These are the last words of John Fisher, a condemned man, read aloud to a crowd about to watch him and his wife, Lavinia Fisher, hang. For the next 200 years, they would be treated as terrors, as killers. But the truth is, they were innocent. In this final statement, he did protest his innocence, but did not linger. Instead, he remarks on this mysterious stranger who came into his life and thanks him and leaves to him a trunk locked by a key containing his little all, along with instructions to keep it safe, that it will be opened when a certain person calls for it. So today, I have a very important question to ask. What's in the box? Hi, I'm Cash the Composer, and I'm writing a musical about Lavinia Fisher. As a resident of Charleston, I always heard the legend of America's first female serial killer, but I was shocked to discover in my research that the truth was far from those myths. It's less of a misandrist Sweeney Todd and more of a up Romeo and Juliet. If you'd like to come along with me as I embark on this effort to adapt the truth of Lavinia's story, hit that subscribe button and ring the little bell to be notified when I post new videos every other week. You can also check out my backlog of videos from the first of this year to see the journey of my research so far, after you finish this video, of course. Now, back to that box. My dad thinks it's something depressing, like the bones of a baby that passed away. My first thought was that it's something practical, like Lavinia's papers, a bill of sale proving ownership, or something of the sort. Others have posited suggestions such as money, Lavinia's wedding dress, even magical voodoo objects, or some act of revenge. But there are a lot of questions that we must address before formulating a theory, and not a lot of answers, unfortunately, but a lot of intrigue. My questions are, who was this stranger? How did the trunk survive the fire that burned down the 6-mile Wayfarer house? Who was the box meant for? When would they call for it? Why would they call for it? What hour has come? And lastly, what was in the box? Let's start at the beginning. First, who was the stranger? The first and most obvious answer is, of course, the Reverend Furman. After all, Furman did listen to John's pleas and ministered to him and was sympathetic to him in his final hours, and was obviously a religious man, potentially worthy at the throne of glory with the angels and all that. To make it further obvious, Furman was the one who delivered this letter to the public at the hanging. But there's one single word that throws this whole thing off. The word hour. You see, John said he shut not his ear to our supplication. Our supplication, not my. Our. Supplication is the act of pleading in earnest, such as for one's innocence or for forgiveness. Here's what the Reverend had to say about Lavinia. Mrs. Fisher also expressed sorrow for her sins, but always appeared to be under the influence of wrong passions and feelings. To me, that certainly sounds like he rejected her prayer and certainly did not weep with her. John mentioned that the man had alleviated their sorrows. Well, Furman went on to say there is probably reason to think she had flattered herself with the expectation of pardon from the executive, and thus was averse to encourage those serious thoughts which a contemplation of her true situation ought to have weakened. Again, doesn't sound like he alleviated any sorrows. Sounds like he dismissed her hope and wanted her to feel sorrow. Yeah. The next possibility is the man that John escaped the jail with, Joseph Roberts. After all, he would have been there to help them weep, to commiserate, to help them feel better. He was caught beside John. He tried to help him in his quest to free Lavinia and got caught for it. The problem, though, is that John Roberts was not a stranger. He was already associated with the Fishers prior to these events. He was jailed again on an assault charge and would hardly be called a stranger for being an old friend. We do have some clues here. This person was a stranger. They did not reject their prayers, and though unknown to them, listened to their pleas of innocence, alleviated their sorrows, wept with them, and did not desert them at any point, and must have been religious. And that they aren't meant to be the recipient of the contents of the box, only its caretaker to hold it until it could be appropriately delivered. Now, my first instinct was that perhaps this man was a member of the clergy. The top contender would be one Reverend Israel Munns. His father was Jamaican and could likely sympathize with Lavinia for more than one reason. Munns worked at the Methodist Church and attended in the same way as Furman to the Fishers' co-conspirator, William Hayward. However, I'm hesitant to ascribe this to him, as the Fishers may have easily been members of his parish prior to their incarceration. My next instinct is to indicate a tenant-turned-friend, a wayfarer, if you will, someone passing through, a complete stranger unknown to Charleston who ended up becoming a trusted confidant, a person staying at the inn when it was razed, who witnessed everything that happened. But then the question is, how would he have been able to attend to them when they were jailed? Perhaps this stranger was instead a criminal, specifically the criminal who confessed to the crimes of which the Fishers were accused, the actual perpetrator of the crimes, guilty, trying to right the scales, or maybe equally innocent, merely trying one last-ditch effort to save their lives. Or maybe, just maybe, it was some combination of the two. Picture this. A person arrives in Charleston who hits a town for its goods and leaves when things get tight, moving on to the next town, the next mark. The 6 Mile would have been ideal, located near a major port, but far enough that the majority of law enforcement wasn't concentrated in that area, an area that already had enough crime that they could blend in without raising any red flags. They begin this highway robbery, using the inn as their base of operations, in the meanwhile befriending the innkeepers such that they wouldn't suspect a thing. Then the inn is approached by a mob, and the mob yanks everyone from the home and burns it to the ground, and they see the innocent innkeepers sent to jail. They stay in Charleston, they attend the trials, they go to the Reverend Furman's sermons, they do everything they can. In January, when the Fishers are sentenced to death, this person finally confesses, not knowing that it's too late, that the government has set on killing these two to send a message. They watch helplessly, knowing that there's nothing they can do, that their actions led to the deaths of these two innocents. Pure conjecture with a little basis in reality, but none of it contradicts the facts, so maybe, no idea though. Moving on, how did the trunk survive the fire? After all, when you burn a house down, it's hard to believe a wooden box would survive the flames. There are a few options here that I can fathom, and none of them are a fireproof box. First, that it was stored elsewhere. Second, that it was buried. Third, that it survived the fire. Fourth, that it was acquired after the fire. So let's go through these one at a time. If it was stored elsewhere, there are 2 locations I can think of. His uncle's estate is the first. However, that estate was located up in North Carolina, days away. Why would he keep his little all so far from home? The second location is more plausible, but also more dangerous. The Satili Glover house, or at least the site where it was being built. Lavinia may have worked on this site as the house was being constructed, so she would have had access to the land and could have shown John the way. There was an older building, circa 1775, that was being adapted into the new construction, and if construction sites today are any indication, there were likely plenty of hiding spots John could utilize. However, there's always the danger of Glover finding the trunk, but the question is, would he have known or cared what it was? Then there's the option of it being buried. After all, the couple buried Sally, Lavinia's sister, nearby, and it seems as though they buried one of the men from the mob. Burying was not out of the question. Perhaps, depending on timing, the box could have been buried with Sally, or with the man from the mob, or even separately from both events. Then we have that it survived the fire. This is least likely, as it was 7 months between the fire and John's escape when he would have been able to find the trunk. Would the land truly sit empty with no scavenging for so long? I doubt it, sincerely, but nevertheless it is an option to be considered. Lastly, there's the wild card option, that it could have been acquired after the fire. After all, John was trying to raise a bribe to free Lavinia. He was caught with some of his stash, but perhaps there was more, or something else, that he had the foresight to hide somewhere else. The answer to this is entirely dependent on the other questions, and that's the thing, isn't it? Everything informs everything else. Finding an answer means finding 5 answers that all make sense in each other's contexts. It's infuriating, isn't it? On to the next question. Who was the box meant for, and when would they call for it? We know that the stranger was not the intended recipient, only the caretaker for the moment. So, who was the box meant for? There are a number of people we can eliminate. First off, the rest of their associates. They could have just been named as the recipient of the box and eliminated the middleman altogether. They lived right there. After all, Hayward was going to be executed, so he's out. Roberts is a potential candidate because he was only in the jail for a year and would get out soon enough, thus requiring a caretaker in the meantime. However, one must then consider that if John cared about this passing on to Roberts so much, why would he not have sent Roberts on his way after their escape with the box? Perhaps the box was meant for himself and he wouldn't have needed it to be passed on if Lavinia had been freed and they could have escaped together, but that's a big maybe, isn't it? We can eliminate pretty much all of the clergy for similar reasons to their associates. In fact, we can eliminate nearly everyone in Charleston, at least everyone of majority age and capable and free. That just leaves people who are far away, minors, disabled, or enslaved. Perhaps several of the above. I have a theory to posit here, and it's somewhat ick. You have to think, what was the precipitating event that sent Lavinia down to Charleston? She was 17 years old, an age where she'd finally be adult enough to actually start to do real work. And yet George Fisher got rid of her. It's fairly clear that she was sold to separate her from John, but the question is, why then? I honestly hate myself for positing this potential answer, and I will address the problematic nature of it in my next video. Subscribe so you see that. But anyways, maybe, just maybe, there was a child. Can you imagine a child coming out of their relationship, revealing their entanglement, leading to their forced separation? It would explain the drastic move, and it would explain Lavinia and John's connection and attachment to one another. Unfortunately, there's no mention of a child anywhere, or maybe fortunately. I don't know. So there's a few possibilities. I'm full of shit, and this isn't even close to what actually happened. Sure. Or maybe the kid died young, or in birth, or even was miscarried. Or maybe the kid was taken and kept by George to be the next generation of slaves and not a clue about their parentage. Or maybe the kid was sold elsewhere to separate them from their parents. The problem with those last two is, wouldn't John have tried to free his own child? Which leads to my last and most horrible theory, that maybe, just maybe, they were told that the child died, but they didn't. Imagine that John found out that his child was alive. I don't know how, but bear with me here. A child far, far away, too young to be on their own, potentially enslaved if they couldn't pass as white. A child who he doesn't know how to find, or even where to begin to look, so he resigns himself to leave behind a box that contains... And this is where I lose my train of thought. But it's all very sensational, isn't it? It relies on a lot of assumptions, a lot of which are very frustratingly cringeworthy and problematic, something out of a soap opera. So let's go in a different direction, another theory. Maybe it was meant to go to Roberts. Perhaps it was something that John intended to have for the rest of his life with Lavinia, something that he thought they'd return to after escaping the jail, but that plan was foiled. Maybe that's why Roberts stuck around. He knew that they had this thing and that they would be set. They just had to be together. And even if he got caught, he'd only be in the jail a few more months before his own release. They were caught, and John realized he had to pass the contents on to someone, and Roberts was the candidate that he felt deserved that. But he'd be in prison until his sentence was up, so somebody needed to watch the box until Roberts' release, such that he could come and retrieve its contents. That's a very realistic answer, but it's also very boring. So let's move on to my favorite answer, the second person narrative answer, the meta answer, the Deadpool answer. We're breaking the fourth wall here, folks. Perhaps the box is meant for someone, not was, is. John and Lavinia knew that the press were painting them as the villains. They knew that the court had admonished them as criminals. They knew that their reputations were tarnished black. They also knew that they were innocent and held on to that hope, even to this last letter, that their innocence would be understood by all. Perhaps that box is meant for that person, for that time when their innocence is finally made into the primary narrative, when the world finally recognizes that they were wronged. Perhaps it is still being held by some caretaker, passed through the generations, waiting for the righteous individual who finally, posthumously, gives these two the justice they deserve. Perhaps this box was meant for you, the audience, as you watch with rapt attention, eager to discover its contents. Perhaps the box was meant for the person who finally tells the story correctly, a simple acknowledgement that yes, they have said the right words and done the right things and righted their wrongs. Perhaps the box was meant for me, and I just have to figure out why. Now, this is a very, very silly answer. And in my book, it's pretty much guaranteed to be complete fiction. But it's the kind of complete bullshit that audiences love nowadays, so I can't promise that it's not gonna be what I do in the show. Genuinely, I am currently leaning towards a whole Pulp Fiction thing. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
We happy? Yeah, we happy.
All right, on to our final question of the day. What was in the box? We've got a few ideas on the caretaker, the who and the why. We've got a few ideas on how it survived, the where and the when. And we've got a few ideas on the intended recipient, the who and the why and the where and the when and the how. Now, what the f*** was in the box? We know that it was locked by a key. We know that it was John's little all. We know that it was granted to this caretaker as he deserted me not while living. We know that it was to be disposed of, and this was explained in a paper within the trunk and a schedule of the whole, essentially a list of whens and wheres and hows and whos in regards to the contents, instructing for it to be removed from its current place and put somewhere safe. We know that someone will call for it. You know, that's actually a lot now that I think about it. The fact that it was locked actually says a lot. The only things we lock in my household are my violin and my partner's guns. Off-site, I keep locked up my money in a bank, obviously, and other valuables. And that's the thing. There's value in all of these things, either monetary value, as with cash and jewelry, physical value, as with guns and other things that can be used immediately, even if their monetary value is low, and sentimental value, as with my violin, though it also holds a decent amount of monetary value. So this box contained something that was worth a lot of money, or would be wanted for the sake of its use, or simply sentimental for its intended recipient, as well as John and Lavinia, or some combination thereof. The phrase little all also says a lot, that it's everything John had to his name, but it wasn't much. This phrase makes me lean towards sentiment, but it doesn't eliminate the other two. Considering that John lost his home and did not own Lavinia, but considered her an equal partner as far as we can tell as his wife, it's difficult to say what other potential possessions he may have claimed to his name. Now, interestingly, the requisite for the caretaker is that they did not desert John and Lavinia in life, which leads John to believe that they will carry out his will in death. The wording here is interesting, though. Why not leave it to an attorney who would be legally bound, such as John Blake White, a sympathizer of their plight, or a clergyman, for whom greed and theft would be a sin in the eyes of God, such as Furman? It's because the caretaker's alliance is not with the law, nor with God, but with the Fishers. Thus, I don't believe it's something legal, like a deed to land or Lavinia's papers, or something religious, like their marriage vows or a wedding dress or a Bible or something. It must be something deeply personal, which he felt precipitated a bond stronger than the legal system or the sacrament of the church. We know that it was meant to be disposed of, i.e. given to someone else, and we know that there was a paper already in the locked trunk explaining exactly when it would go, where it would go, and who it would go to. This shows forethought. that the contents of the box, when it was prepared, whenever that was, were prepared with the knowledge that it was meant to be passed on after his death, and that the intended recipient might not be able to immediately accept it after his death, so it would have to go to a caretaker in the meantime, a caretaker who, I should point out, would not already know the instructions. So there's a fascinating thing here. The caretaker is someone who John trusts with his life, but not enough to share the contents or information regarding the contents of this box until he literally has no other choice. We know that it needed to be kept safe, which I know doesn't seem like a lot, but safety is a term that can mean a lot of things. Yes, it might mean keeping it safe from theft, but it also might mean keeping it safe from prying eyes, safe from the elements like the torrential hurricanes we tend to get here in the South, safe from aging or other damage. You get the gist. Safety could mean any number of things in regards to whatever the contents may be. Lastly, we know that somebody, the intended recipient, will call for it. This means 3 things. First, that the intended recipient knows that there's something they need to call for, but not necessarily what exactly it contains. Second, that the intended recipient will know who to call to acquire it and when. Third, that this person is not named, either because John did not wish to share the name of the recipient, but was perfectly okay with people knowing the name of the caretaker, or because he himself did not know the name of the recipient. That's a lot. So to summarize, the contents had to be protected because of some monetary, physical, or sentimental value that was all John had to his name. Likely not something of a religious or legal nature, as it was entrusted to someone with an allegiance to the Fishers rather than an attorney or clergyman, but something that John did not want to reveal the nature of until he had no other choice. There was always the notion that it would have to be passed on to someone and that the recipient would be unable to lay claim, so instructions for a caretaker were left inside. We know that it needed to be kept safe, though not from what, and we know that the intended recipient was aware of the thing, though they might not be aware of its full contents. All that is to say, there's a number of things that I can think of that almost fit the bill, but not quite. Lavinia's papers seem good until you realize that it would have been better to entrust them to an attorney. The bones of a child would definitely have to be kept safe, but again, a clergyman would have been able to ensure their proper custody to get a proper burial. Things of actual monetary value, if not entrusted to an attorney, but to someone verifiably honest without the threat of the law, would make sense until one realizes that if John trusted the caretaker not to steal it after his death, he would have also trusted them to certainly not do so while he was still alive and could actually do something about it. There's the go bag idea, everything they needed to start a new life, perhaps some mix of the practical and the sentimental, but then how would he have known to include instructions in case of his passing? I apologize because it seems that I've created kind of a clickbait video here because I'm afraid I don't really have a satisfactory answer. I just have this mess of ideas. I'll get into plotting the show soon enough, and we're going to be dealing with a lot of options and talking about how to narrow it down, or even if we have to narrow it down. The point is, if you skip to the ending to find out the answer of what's in the box, sorry, my bad. Misleading title text. I have no fucking clue, but I've started my search. And I do mean that literally. Much to the chagrin of yard sailors and estate sailors everywhere, I am constantly trolling Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, the Habitat for Humanity Restore, Goodwill, Poshmark, I don't know, everything else, looking for old trunks, trying to find the one that might have been John's to see if I can maybe find a clue as to its former contents. So far, no luck, obviously, but a lot of very, very confused sellers. My many apologies to you all for that. Now, that's just my thoughts. I want to hear your theories down in the comments below. What do you think was in the box? Let me know. I'd appreciate your insights. I'll see you guys in the next video. Just be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. I'll be talking about the elephant in the room as previously mentioned. But in the meantime, you can catch up on the rest of my research through that playlist that just popped up on the screen, hereabouts or thereabouts. I'm bad at left and right. That's all today. Bye y'all. Hope to see y'all next time.